Today's story is about the elderly lady on the night bus. Now this is over on our blog site, mountbuses.com, but with the audio recording it will maybe add a little bit more context to what is also written down. So this story takes place in Manchester on a 216 night bus. The night buses often ran on a Friday and Saturday night, starting around midnight and ending at 4 o'clock. At this time, the night buses in Manchester was run by different depots, but overall one depot took control and you would operate out of your own depot but answer to the main depot. At my depot at the time, it was generally the same drivers that took the night duties. This was just because it was easier. The depots knew that we'd just get on with it and that everything would be hunky-dory. The night duties, though, some of them came with a problem, which was the duty length would be too long, or the driving hours involved would be too long for the duty. So many of us, which became a way of life on a Friday and Saturday night, had our own made-up duties, whether this was you'd be spare and then go out and do your night, or you'd have the back half of a late duty, then go on to your night. Either way, that was our way of life. This meant the drivers were quite regular on the 200 services, meaning we knew the passengers and we knew who was the workers who might be running a little bit late because they've been working and coming out of the bar or whatever. This enabled us to sometimes bend the rules slightly. For example, leaving a few minutes late because you knew that person needed to get that bus, and if they weren't at the bus stop you'd wait an extra couple of minutes just to make sure they caught it if they was in work, and I did that plenty of times. Now this incident takes place, as I say, on a 216 night service, starting in Manchester and ending in Manchester, which does sound a bit strange, but it does go via Ashton. So the 216 was quite a busy night bus, to be fair. At least part of it was quite busy, and you'd be thundering up and down the Ashton New Road. I think it was something like 6 times. It ran every half an hour, so you'd have half an hour to get to Ashton, half an hour back. So you did quite a few trips on it. I think it was something like 3 round trips. They had 2 vehicles running it. You'd have one starting in Ashton, which was run by one depot, and the same depot would run the other one, which started in Manchester. Now on this night, can't remember which trip it was, but the elderly lady boarded in Piccadilly, tried to scan her pass. Now on the night services, it's special fares apply. Now for some reason some OAP passes work and some don't. That is something to do with TFGM or the area they're issued in. But it wasn't valid, but let her travel. No harm in it. She's got a pass at the end of the day. Just because it doesn't scan means nothing, and not going to mess about at that time of night trying to get £2.50 off an elderly lady who just wants to go home. She's probably been out with her friends, or she's been to some do. Because, let's be honest, elderly ladies, they're not really going to be there for a party, are they? Not in the same respect a 20-year-old is, but could be wrong. So, as she got on, she made a remark, and I didn't really pay any attention to it, about tablets. Now, in hindsight, putting it together, there was she was on about sleeping tablets, but, you know, you don't really think, once people have had a drink, you don't really think about what they're telling you. It's, you know, you just there people try and make conversation as they get on because they're a bit more boisterous than they would be normally. So I didn't really think about it. So I drove the route up to Ashton, thundered a lot down the road. Always on the night service, I would always try and pull up on a separate stand in Ashton. Not a problem. You was the only service running at that time of night. So pulling up on a separate stand was not difficult. You had about, at the time, you had like 30 stands to choose from. So I just pull up out the way, and then I alighted my passengers there. This gave the chance for me to safely check the bus before allowing the new passengers on. You check the bus for sleepers and stuff like that, because you never know what you will find on a night service. Tell you what, I've found some strange objects on the night service. So you check. So as I got out, this elderly lady was fast asleep on the bus. I think she was like the 2nd or 3rd row back on the passenger side. She was quite content asleep. So I attempted to wake her. Now, waking passengers is something that you're given guidance for how to do it and how not to do it. Now, it's generally agreed upon that for waking passengers you have more than one person present, just in case. Now this being Ashton, no one around apart from the passengers have just booted off the bus, and all them have gone. Because no one wants to hang around. You try not to spook the passenger, so don't try and be a gorilla and wake them up, because that just doesn't work. This is the bit where you have to decide yourself. You need to keep an escape route open. Now, whichever way you stand as a driver, you've got an escape route. You can jump out the emergency exit, or you can make it for the doors. You always leave the bus doors open. This is in case, if I know it's unlikely, but elderly lady, but you could be waking a young person who's on drugs. You need to be able to keep that exit open so that if they want to run, they can. You're not trapping them inside the vehicle. The last thing you want to do is trap a drugged drunk inside a vehicle with you. So you choose which way you want to do it. You either stand to the side of them, where then you've got the emergency door at the back, or you stand in front of them, where you've got the cab door, the normal doors at the front. If you're waking them upstairs, that's where it becomes a bit tricky, because your back exit has disappeared. But generally speaking, I personally would be in between the passenger and the stairs, because then at least you can run down the stairs and out the way. So there, and the last rule is don't touch them. That is a little bit difficult, because sometimes they do need a little bit of a nudge just to wake them up. But hey ho, it's how you do the general nudge. You know, you don't want to be grabbing them and shaking them, but you know. So in this case, it's sort of clear that just suddenly jarring her awake was not the best idea. Now, students on a 143, for instance, the way I'd wake them is banging on surfaces. Quite an unpleasant way of waking them up, but it normally did the trick. Now with these, with them you could get away with it, but you don't really want to be jarring and suddenly waking an elderly lady up, because then that when she turns from a sleeper into a possible heart attack case, and that's the last thing you want. That's a lot more paperwork. So I attempted to arouse the lady by shouting at her, which was, you know, you gradually get louder and see if they disturb. Now, I know I said don't touch them, but normally the other way I'd do it is a gentle wiggle or push of the arm, which is usually enough just to wake someone up, but not spook them, not startle them. You know, they might jump a little bit, but they're generally okay. They'll normally wake up and wonder where the hell they are, because they don't remember actually falling asleep on the bus. But this lady was not waking up. So being in Ashton, I was away from any immediate help. It's not really a police matter, and the inspectors would have had significant distance to travel to come and aid me, as they would have been based in Manchester, or would have been at the depot on the other side of Manchester, so not really in a way of quickly getting to me. So to follow the procedure, I requested a call from comms. That is pressing in this company the little green button or your pedal, listening for the radio tone, and that will then show a call has gone through and has been requested. Now this is the bit that relies on the depot you're from doing it correctly, which is redirecting your radio call. All radio calls after a certain time at this time went through to one depot, but it would require the depot to reroute the calls. They answered. I explained the situation. They told me to wait there. This was very typical, because there's nothing the depot could do. So they would relay my bus number over to the inspectors, who then would initiate a radio private call between you and them. They do this by, it's just like a phone, they dial the number on their radio. In the companies that I was for, you just dialed the fleet number, and then you'd get the private dial tone. So you'd get the private radio call tone, which was just a quick dum, and then you'd have or in this case you had the inspector would initiate the call as protocol with the fleet number. So for this example, 19165, and then you would reply. Radio policy at that point was you'd answer your first radio call with your fleet number in response. This ensured that they knew they was talking to the right person and they hadn't misdialed, as this was common. So I answered 19165. They believe that I have a sleeper, so I answered back 165. I always used to omit the 19 or the 10, and it was just 165. Explained that I had a lady sleeping. She was breathing. I couldn't wake her up. What would you like me to do? So we went through the options. I could wait for them to come to Ashton and deal with the passenger there. Or, as she was breathing, she was safe, it was chosen that she might wake up on the way back and get off the bus on the way back. But if not, they would meet me in Manchester. This made sure that the service ran for those that were waiting for it in Ashton. And it gave an opportunity in Manchester, you know, the ambulance service isn't far away, the police aren't far away if they needed them. So that was the better option. So I travelled with the woman back to Manchester whilst remaining in service, and the inspectors would meet me there. So I travelled back to Manchester as instructed. Before I arrived on stand, as I am coming down the road, I flipped my numbers over to not in service and alighted the passengers. The inspectors were at the bus stop waiting for me. They came aboard and I explained the situation again, that she's not moved, she's not disturbed, and she's fast asleep, and I could not arouse her at the Ashton. I tried shouting at her, I tried tapping her, and nothing was bringing her back awake. So now we had the safety in numbers. This safety in numbers in these situations is definitely more a potential liability claim thing comes along to. That person assaulted me when there's witnesses about, so that is more what it's about. They spent some time and even trying to wonder what they would do at this point, as the lady wouldn't wake up. 5 minutes of trying, they managed to wake her up through, I think it was something like shaking her arm and shouting at her. We didn't have a name or nothing like that, so you couldn't shout a name. They had a brief chat. This is then when these pills come into light. As she had explained, she'd taken the sleeping pills before getting on the bus, and they'd obviously taken a much quicker effect than what was expected, maybe due to alcohol being in her system as well, who knows. But this meant that she was well and truly asleep on these tablets. I can tell you what, they were good tablets. So they double checked she was okay, then asked me, "Are you happy to take her?" Now this is a very key question. This is where you as a driver have that opportunity to say, "No, I'm not happy to take her." But yes, I'm happy to take her, but she wasn't doing any harm. She said she'd stay awake now, so I said, yes, I'll take her. But I was aware that this was my last trip to Ashton. I was returning out of service back from Ashton, so she would become a problem if she fell asleep again. But anyway, I flipped my numbers back to the 216 Ashton night service and loaded up. She gladly got off the bus at her bus stop, said thank you very much, and she was sorry for the nuisance she'd caused and got on her way. Now, put yourself in this position. What would have you done? What would have you done differently? Please comment below on your thoughts and suggestions to how this situation was handled and how you would handle it yourself. Thanks for listening.